Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor to rise tonight in adjournment proceedings to pursue a question I asked in the House on June 14th of this year. Adjournment proceedings we call colloquially within the House of Commons late show. And the purpose of adjournment proceedings is to pursue an answer we received in question period that didn't completely answer the question. One of the difficulties with this process is that quite often, by the time we get a chance to pursue the answer, a great deal of time has passed. So I asked this question on June 14th, and the Prime Minister's answer was not in any way evasive, but it didn't fully respond to what I was hoping to hear. Of course, that's not uncommon. But I now address the question many months later, and much has changed. So let me first review the question I asked June 14th, which was in relation to the upcoming G20 summit. There were a number of stories, particularly in the German press, that Canada was backing off full commitment to reference to the Paris Accords in the communiqué, which was to be hosted by Chancellor Merkel. And the speculation in the German press was that Canada was doing this to appease the U.S. administration. I was entirely pleased that the Prime Minister refuted these claims in the German press, and that, in fact, the G20 summit communiqué was strongly in favor of commitment to the Paris Accord, even though the U.S. Has made it clear that at least the executive of the U.S. government does not want to abide by the Paris Accords, although they have not legally withdrawn, and neither have they withdrawn from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Much has changed since then. I just have returned from COP23, the 23rd Conference of the Parties in Bonn. Took place over the 2 weeks that ended in the wee hours of Saturday morning, 7 a.m., just this last Saturday. As ever, climate negotiations are difficult, but the negotiations in Bonn, which were actually hosted by the government of Fiji, this was an unusual proceeding, but it meant that it was the first time that a low-lying island state from the Pacific could actually host a climate negotiation. This particular round of negotiations, despite the novelty of Fiji in the chair and the efforts by the Fijian presidency to raise the issues of the immediate existential threats to low-lying island states, I think the negotiations are fairly described as minimalistic, workmanlike, and achieved the bare minimum of what had to be done. Right now, Canada is poised on the eve of taking the chairmanship of the G7. This is an amazing opportunity for Canada at this time, and I'll set out why. And I'm particularly pleased that the Government of Canada, the Prime Minister, has said that 3 themes will emerge for Canada's presidency of the G7, and one of them is climate. This is also encouraging. What's not encouraging at this point is the lack of progress since Paris, the lack of leadership since Paris. And I'm not pointing fingers at any one government, but there's clearly a lack of leadership globally. Chancellor Merkel has been very damaged by the last election in Germany. I know I speak for many who hope that she'll succeed in putting together a coalition government to avoid holding yet another election so soon in Germany, particularly in light of the frightening rise of the far right and anti-immigration, in fact, pretty close to Nazi party. We are looking at a situation where obviously the U.S. isn't in leadership. The world actually needs Canada to step up and show real leadership, which means not just saying we're leaders, it means updating our nationally determined contribution, pledging to deeper cuts in carbon, and pledging to better financing. This is the challenge we face tonight.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
As the honourable member mentioned, the original question actually related to the G20 and the G20 declaration. And as she also mentioned, I'm proud to note that Canada worked hard with our G20 partners to reaffirm the irreversibility of the Paris Agreement and our strong commitment to take action. And there were a number of concrete measures that were outlined in the G20 communique that related to that. Canada remains fully committed to playing a significant leadership role on the international stage with respect to addressing the incredibly important issue of climate change. On an international basis, the One Planet Summit, which is coming up in France, will be an opportunity for the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada to once again demonstrate Canada's commitment to moving this issue forward on an international basis. Domestically, Canada has developed with the provinces and territories the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, which provides a path through which we intend to meet or exceed the targets to which we have committed under the Paris Agreement. And as we have said a number of times, the focus for us, unlike previous governments, is on ensuring that we are meeting the targets to which we have committed, and to the extent that we are able to make progress more rapidly, we will ratchet up our level of ambition.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have the report now from the Environmental Commissioner within the Office of the Auditor General, making it clear that Canada at this point has not been developing the plans to meet the 2020 target out of Copenhagen, and that on current projections, it's very difficult to see how we will meet the target that we have. The target that we have is actually too weak to be called a Paris target. It's the same target that was put forward under the previous government under Stephen Harper. It's not to blame anyone here. There is a global problem, and it is this: the totality of targets committed to by all governments at the moment, if fully achieved, do not achieve the Paris target of not going above 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are looking at levels of warming, very catastrophic levels, 2 and 3 times more than our pledges. We can't wait to take the decision to increase the target and develop the plans to meet it.
The Honourable Parliament Secretary.
I thank the honourable member for her comments. As the honourable member knows very well, the focus of this government is the 2030 target. The government was elected in the late 2015, and through the course of 2016, it developed, in cooperation with the provinces and territories, the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change. The focus of that document is on achieving the target on the 2030 target. And we are going to be taking concrete measures to ensure that we meet or exceed that goal. Of course, the honourable member is very familiar with the fact that many of the measures that are contained in the Pan-Canadian Framework relate to changes in the way in which Canadians actually do things that are going to require time and thought as to how they are doing. If you're going to electrify significant portions of the transportation network, that actually takes time. It takes infrastructure. If you're going to work towards accelerating the phase out of coal, that takes time and it takes thought and planning as to how you're actually going to replace that power. The government is taking thoughtful and concrete steps to ensure that we are addressing climate change domestically, and we are playing a significant role to push forward the climate agenda internationally.